told you World War III wasn't just a possibility, but that it was already scheduled. For January 2026, no less. Today, we're diving into a really speculative narrative that lays out a chilling, day-by-day playbook for how the next global conflict could kick off. So let's bite down this so-called doomsday calendar and see what it's all about.
So, is the world on the brink? According to the source material we're digging into, this isn't some far-off hypothetical question. It claims the fuses have, well, already been lit. It presents this incredibly dramatic scenario that's really designed to make you think about how close we might be to a point of no return. The core idea here is that these huge, world-changing conflicts, they don't just happen overnight. If you look at World War I or World War II, they were the result of years, even decades of tension, just simmering below the surface. The assassination of a prince or the invasion of Poland, those were just the final sparks that lit the whole thing up. And this narrative, it basically suggests we're in that simmering phase right now.
Okay, so to really make its case, the source lays out this hypothetical blow-by-blow timeline for the first few days of January 2026. It's got a pretty dramatic name for it, too, the Calendar of Destruction. It's all about a rapid series of events that just completely spirals out of control.
Now, to understand the very first domino that falls in this whole scenario, we've got to do a quick history lesson. We're talking about the Monroe Doctrine. For 200 years, this has basically been the U.S.'s official justification for getting involved in Latin America. Its backyard, so to speak. And the source argues that on January 1st, 2026, this old doctrine gets dusted off and used in a really, really shocking and overt way.
And once it starts, wow, it escalates fast. It kicks off on January 1st with the U.S. just removing Venezuela's president. But look how quickly it snowballs. Within a single week, the U.S. has seized a Russian nuclear sub, slapped India with a massive tariff, and blockaded oil tankers going to China. According to this narrative, these aren't random isolated events. No, there are rapid-fire series of provocations that forces Russia and North Korea into an emergency meeting. It's an absolute whirlwind.
So you might be asking yourself, what on earth could possibly justify such aggressive moves, right? Well, the narrative argues the real war isn't over land or resources. It's about something way more fundamental, a hidden war to protect the absolute supremacy of the US dollar. And this is the weapon of choice, a 50% tariff. The source really hammers this point home. A number this big isn't some negotiating tactic. It's presented as a flat-out declaration of economic war. And not against an old enemy, but against a supposed strategic partner, India.
So the official reason given, according to the source, is almost trivial, a bruised ego. But it argues the real reason is way more significant. See, for decades, the US dollar has been the world's currency. It's the bedrock of American power. But countries like India, Russia, and China have started to trade oil in their own currencies. And in this narrative, this 50% tariff is a brutal punishment and a warning to the entire world. You challenge the dollar, you will pay a heavy price.
And this is exactly why the source gives this version of the president a specific nickname, Dollar Trump. In this telling of events, every single action, from what happens in Venezuela to the tariff on India, is all driven by one obsessive goal: preserve the dollar's dominance, no matter what the cost. But the aggression in this scenario doesn't stop with adversaries. The narrative claims the strategy then takes this shocking turn, pivoting to target America's own allies and threatening to unravel the entire global order we've known since World War II. And this is probably the most shocking claim in the whole narrative. A direct threat to Denmark, a fellow founding member of NATO. The source claims this ultimatum just completely shatters NATO's core principle. An attack on one is an attack on all. But what happens when the threat comes from inside the house? So why Greenland? Why all the fuss? Well, according to the source, it's because the island is an absolute treasure trove of rare earth minerals. This is the stuff that's essential for building basically everything in our modern world, from our phones to sophisticated missile systems. And this scenario suggests the U.S. is willing to break a 70-year-old alliance just to control those resources. The fallout from a threat like that is, of course, immediate. The narrative claims that allies like Poland and Germany suddenly realize they can't count on American protection anymore. The question becomes, if the U.S. is willing to bully one ally for resources, who's next? So they start rearming, getting ready for a world where they might be totally on their own. The story then shifts gears. It moves away from conventional threats and dives into the conflicts that are supposedly already being fought, but in the shadows. We're talking about cyberspace and outer space, battlefields where a war can be won or lost before a single shot is ever fired. And here's where a major, real-world figure gets pulled into the narrative: Elon Musk. It specifically alleges that his Starlink network was a key instrument in that Venezuelan operation. And it goes on to claim he's also involved in Iran, basically positioning him as this incredibly powerful private citizen who's a key player in a new kind of warfare. And this, right here, is the modern doomsday scenario. A war fought not with tanks, but with keyboards. Imagine hackers taking down a national power grid, shutting off hospitals, banks, everything. Or a war in space, knocking out GPS satellites and blinding entire armies. And as the source points out, this isn't just sci-fi stuff. Russia has already put out a very stark warning about this exact possibility. So, what does all this mean for the average person, for you and me? Well, the source argues that these huge geopolitical chess moves are going to have absolutely devastating consequences for everybody else. And maybe the most ominous sign in this whole narrative is what's supposedly happening behind the scenes. The source claims the world's super rich are already preparing for the absolute worst, pouring millions into high-tech, self-sufficient bunkers. And it poses this really chilling question. If the people with the most to lose are heading underground, what do they know that we don't? The first economic shockwave, according to this scenario, would be oil. If Russia or Iran were to retaliate by blocking shipping lanes, the price of oil wouldn't just rise, it would explode. The source projects a jump from around $63 a barrel all the way up to over $350. That is a catastrophic leap. And that kind of price spike would trigger a complete economic catastrophe for everyone else. We're talking soaring prices for groceries, for medicine, for everything. Your loan payments would skyrocket. Companies would collapse, leading to mass unemployment. The source just paints this picture of total chaos, where people lose all faith in institutions and start hoarding cash and gold just to survive. Ultimately, the narrative's grim conclusion is that the world order we've known since World War II, it's just finished. And in its place is a world where the only rule is the personal will of the most powerful leader, where a social media post can declare a new head of state, and a personal whim can launch a global trade war. And that leaves us with the final big question. Should we take this as some kind of literal prediction for 2026, or is it more of a dark fable for our times? A cautionary tale about what can happen when the ego of one person becomes more powerful than the laws and alliances that for decades have held